On my 10th wedding anniversary with Elena, I had booked the private room at Marcelo's, that little French place downtown, all because Elena once mentioned their signature steak frites was her absolute favorite. As the youngest tenured professor at Crestwood University, she was always conscious of her image, terrified of looking unprofessional to her students, so she never let me pick her up from campus. Today, though, she had actually asked me to. The thought of her smile when she saw what I had planned made my heart feel light. But halfway there, a garbage truck appeared out of nowhere, slamming into my car and sending us both careening into the city canal. Quick rescue saved my life, but I slipped into a coma. Daddy, Daddy. Through the fog, I could faintly hear the small voices of my son and daughter. Elena had carried our twins, my precious babies, the only people in this world I cherished more than her. Their sweet, childish calls slowly pulled my consciousness back. When I woke, the children weren't there. Only Elena sat by my hospital bed, her face a blank mask, no flicker of joy at seeing me awake. She had always been emotionally reserved. I didn't mind. The ventilator kept me from speaking, so I weakly lifted a hand, trying to touch hers to reassure her. She flinched, a frown of disgust creasing her brow, and moved her hand away, resting it instead on the oxygen machine humming beside me. Julian, you know I've been waiting for this day. Her voice was flat, cold. After you ruined Marcus Thorne, you should have known this was coming. If you hadn't ripped me away from him, Marcus wouldn't have drunk himself into an early grave. He'd still be here. Elena's dark, obsidian eyes stared into mine, each word a hammer blow. Julian, you killed him. You destroyed the beautiful life that should have been ours. Her words were poisoned arrows, shattering the foundation of love I had built for her over all these years. Marcus Thorne. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. I knew he had died, and that Elena, for old time's sake, had mourned him for a while, but I never knew she had held on to his memory this long, let alone blamed me for his death. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, a mask of sorrow that quickly twisted into a smile. A beautiful, terrifying smile, fractured and savage. The garbage truck didn't finish the job, huh? Don't worry, I can give you a little push. Before I could process her words, her perfectly manicured hand moved slowly, deliberately, to the oxygen tube keeping me alive. She pulled it free. Without air, unable to breathe on my own, my vision blackened. A giant vortex was sucking me down as I twitched, helpless. Elena's smile widened. Was it my imagination, or did I see a flash of triumph in her eyes? It finally hit me. Our 10 years together, had it all been for revenge for Marcus? I couldn't accept it. All those years of love, of devotion, of caring for her. Surely she felt something for me? At least we had our children. The thought of them sparked a desperate will to live. I fought, trying to lift my hand to the call button. Oh, Elena said, her voice light, conversational. Forgot to tell you. The kids aren't yours either. Just some random guy. The thought of having children with someone as despicable as you, it made me sick. Her words were the final blow, extinguishing my last flicker of hope. My eyelids grew heavy. Her familiar, yet horribly alien face was the last thing I saw. The clatter of a chair jolted me awake. My head snapped up, and I found myself staring into a pair of young, handsome eyes. An 18-year-old kid grinned at me, a cocky glint in his eye. He waved a pale blue envelope before casually tucking it into the desk in front of mine. Hey, buddy, he said, his voice low. Don't try anything funny. I know you and Elena go way back, neighbors and all. You want her to be happy, right? His words hit me. I was back, reborn, back to the moment Marcus Thorne slipped Elena that love letter. It all came flooding back. Last time, after Marcus left, I had snatched the letter. I had used it as evidence, marching straight to the teachers and Elena's parents. School and parental pressure forced Marcus to back off to prevent Elena, a straight-A student, second in our class, from being corrupted. Our homeroom teacher even disciplined Marcus over some trumped-up infraction. Without the structure of school, Marcus fell in with a bad crowd, drinking, joyriding. He died in a drunk driving accident. And for this burnout, Elena had hated me for over a decade in my previous life. After I finally married her, I had worked myself to the bone to give her and the kids a comfortable life. I thought I was a good husband, a good father. I had done everything a man could do for the woman he loved, for his family. And my reward? To be murdered by the woman I had cherished for years. A bitter wave of grief and disbelief washed over me. Marcus Thorne, standing before me now, his eyes filled with impatience and warning, seemed a cruel joke. No denying it. Marcus had the looks, that rebellious, handsome swagger that made girls swoon. I stared into his eyes for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Yeah, I want her to be happy. If Elena had yearned for Marcus Thorne that much in my past life, then this time I'd respect her choice. I'd give her the life she wanted. Marcus seemed satisfied. He turned and sauntered out of the classroom. True to my word, I didn't touch the letter. I had no intention of telling Elena's parents or the teachers. After gym class, Elena returned, her face flushed from the sun, radiating youthful energy. My heart still clenched, not with a thrill, but with the unhealable ache of betrayal. Julian, you missed it. We played basketball against Mr. Miller's class. Too bad you had the headache. Elena, in her school days, was outgoing, her words still carrying the easy intimacy of our childhood friendship. I opened my mouth, a familiar retort on my lips, but then closed it. Nothing came out. She didn't seem to notice, settling into her seat in the front row, gathering her books for the next class. Her hand reached into her desk and pulled out the pale blue envelope. Elena's deskmate, Chloe Vance, spotted it instantly. A love letter, she squealed. The words rippled through the bored sophomore class. Heads turned. Elena's neck flushed a cute shade of pink. Way to go, Julian, faking a headache to slip Elena a love letter. You two are practically childhood sweethearts. Why a letter? If I were you, I'd just go talk to her parents about marrying her already. A few of our friends teased me. I just shook my head, a small, detached smile on my face. Before I could deny it, Elena cut in. Don't be ridiculous. Julian and I are just neighbors. We were always together, walking to and from school. The rumor mill had churned out plenty about us. This was the first time I had heard Elena issue such a blunt denial. My classmates exchanged confused glances. Seriously, guys, don't spread rumors. You'll ruin our resident genius's chances with other girls, Elena added, trying to cover her embarrassment. She never once looked back at me. A strange feeling prickled at me, but before I could dwell on it, someone sharpied noticed something on the envelope. It's signed with an M. There's only one guy in our class with a name starting with M. Oh my God, it's Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne, handsome, rebellious, a magnet for secret crushes. The thought of him being into Elena and expressing it so romantically probably broke a few hearts in that room. Someone joked, Elena's a super nerd, no way she'd. They trailed off. Marcus was a troublemaker. No one wanted to cross him. But the implication was clear. Elena would never fall for a bad boy like Marcus. Who says I wouldn't? Elena suddenly stood up, waving the now open letter. I caught a glimpse of the bold black ink. Be my girlfriend. The warning bell rang. Marcus Thorne appeared at the classroom door. Elena walked towards him in front of everyone, her voice trembling. She declared, Marcus Thorne, yes, I'll be your girlfriend. Marcus, clearly surprised by her boldness, froze for a second before pulling her into a quick, tight hug. The classroom erupted. Cheers, catcalls, whistles. Only I watched, a cold observer, until the cap of my pen dug into my palm, a sharp, grinding pain. Elena and I were neighbors, but closer than that. My dad and Elena's father were colleagues at Apex Corp, a major local corporation. They had started around the same time, young, ambitious, initially rivals, but their parallel climbs had forged a deep friendship. They married, settled down. The company provided housing in a tight-knit development, and they ended up in apartments on different floors of the same building. The next year, Elena and I were born just a month apart. Even though I was older, Elena was always taller when we were little. When other kids in the neighborhood picked on me, Elena would charge in like a little superhero, shielding me. She always wore her hair in pigtail buns back then, usually in a little red dress. To me, she was like Wonder Woman, invincible. But she wasn't really Wonder Woman. Once, defending me, she twisted her ankle. It clearly hurt, but she just stood there, eyes red, stubbornly refusing to cry. That image, her fierce defiance, made something shift in my young heart. From that day on, I vowed to protect her for a lifetime. I didn't know then how long a lifetime was, only that I had to be good to her, always shield her from every hurt, every scrape. That's what I thought, and that's what I did as best I could. Kindergarten, elementary, middle school, High school. Elena and I were always in the same class. Not a coincidence. Our dads arranged it, wanting us to look out for each other. We were happy to oblige their well-meaning efforts. I excelled in science and math. I'd patiently break down any problem Elena struggled with. She, in turn, was like a little taskmaster, nagging me to memorize vocabulary lists for English. We consistently topped the class rankings, first and second. The first day of high school, we made a pact. We'd go to a top college together, somewhere out east. I thought Elena and I would follow that path step by step for a lifetime. Until sophomore year when a transfer student arrived, Marcus Thorne. Our school didn't have a rigid honors track back then. Our classes had top students like Elena and me, but also made room for artsy types like Marcus. Word was he was a street dancer, pretty talented. When Elena would chatter excitedly about Marcus, her eyes sparkling, I'd dismiss it. What was the use of being a good dancer in high school if your grades weren't there? You wouldn't get into a decent university. At the New Year's Eve talent show during our sophomore year, I only went because attendance was mandatory. I never expected Marcus's finale act to electrify the entire auditorium. His performance was undeniably flawless. The driving beat, the explosive moves. The crowd went wild, especially the girls. At the end, Marcus struck a pose, throwing a heart gesture to the audience, which sent another wave of frenzy through the stands. I found the attention-grabbing stunt incredibly childish. I turned my head and saw Elena, who had stood up at some point, her gaze locked on Marcus. Her face flushed a deep crimson, almost shy. I didn't know then that Marcus had already captured her heart. I certainly didn't know that his little stage gesture had been meant for her. From that day on, Marcus always found ways to be near Elena. After the last class, he'd be the first to grab her dinner from the cafeteria. During evening study hall, he'd often use the excuse of asking questions or copying notes to invite her to the empty seat next to him. In my previous life, there was no way I would have let someone steal Elena from me. That's why the moment he gave her that love letter, I crushed any inappropriate thoughts he might have had. Reborn, having decided not to interfere in Elena's life, I forced myself to be a silent observer despite the lingering bitterness in my heart. After publicly declaring her relationship with Marcus, Elena started keeping her distance from me. The high school workload was intense, a relentless cycle of early mornings and late nights. Before, Elena and I had always walked together. After that day, she never waited for me. Several mornings, heading downstairs, I'd see Marcus giving Elena a ride on his bike, their figures receding in the early morning light. Watching their easy laughter and affectionate gestures, I thought I'd be furious. Surprisingly, any strong emotion I felt about Elena was slowly settling, fading with time. Elena and Marcus grew closer. She even moved herself from her front row seat to the back, next to Marcus. Our homeroom teacher talked to Elena, who claimed she was just helping the new transfer student catch up. The teacher, always protective of her star pupil, worried about bad influences and firmly ordered Elena back to her original seat. Frustrated by the reduced time with Marcus, Elena started skipping evening study sessions frequently. Marcus, as an art student, wasn't required to attend. Clearly, they moved their rendezvous off campus. I didn't know where they met at first. Then one night, after study hall, I saw them under the neon glow of an internet cafe sign, kissing. It wasn't the innocent affection of the school hallways. To fit into Marcus's world, Elena had started wearing gaudy jewelry and heavy smoky eyeliner. If I hadn't grown up with her, hadn't lived with her for 10 years in another life, I wouldn't have believed the girl with the rebellious, goth-like look on the steps was Elena. After more than a decade, I'd forgotten a lot of what I'd learned in high school. I had to redouble my efforts, studying late into the night to slowly regain that old academic rhythm. At midterms, I had barely managed to hold on to my top rank. Avoiding suspicion, Elena, however, who had always been a solid no, plummeted for the first time in her life. Her grades crashed. She was barely pulling AB average. Getting home after school, I saw Elena and her mom at the entrance to our neighborhood. With a top student like Elena, such a drastic drop in grades would definitely warrant a call to her parents. A simple conversation, and her teachers would discover Elena's excused absences were really her skipping class. Mrs. Hayes was lecturing Elena as they walked. She was usually a gentle woman, but this time she was furious, her voice raised, drawing stares from neighbors. Elena, though, looked completely unfazed, as if her mother were scolding someone else. I tried to duck away, but Mrs. Hayes spotted me. "Julian, wait up." She hurried over, a little breathless. "You must know why Elena's grades have slipped so badly, don't you? Tell me, Julian." I instinctively glanced past her at Elena, who shot me a warning look. I still didn't tell Mrs. Hayes the truth, just mumbled some excuse. She knew Elena, and I had been close since we were kids, and guessed I was covering for her. Realizing she wouldn't get anything out of me, she didn't press further. She sighed repeatedly, urging me to help Elena more, then turned and left. Elena didn't follow her mother. Instead, she walked over to me. "Thanks," she said. It had been a long time since she'd spoken to me directly. Her tone was stiff, tinged with a streetwise swagger she probably wasn't even aware of. Looking at her familiar face, a wave of pity washed over me. I started to say something, to offer some carefully worded advice, but she waved her hand impatiently. "I know what you're going to say. Save it. I don't want to hear it." Her eyes hardened. "Look, I'm going to be with Marcus. I missed my chance last lifetime. This time, I'm not letting go." I froze, staring at her in disbelief. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Her once bright eyes were bloodshot from late nights and heavy makeup, slightly clouded. They stared back at me, defiant. I hadn't imagined it. She was reborn too. If any shred of affection for the teenage Elena still lingered in me, it vanished in that instant. I didn't need Elena to deliberately create distance. I started actively avoiding her. Outside of class, I did my best to never be in the same place as her. I couldn't bear to see that young face masking the soul of the woman who had murdered me. Even with my avoidance, our childhood sweetheart history made Marcus uneasy. One day after school, he followed me into a quiet alley, shoving me against a wall. I didn't bother to resist. "I'm warning you, Elena's my girl now. You better not get any ideas." His declaration was so childish it was almost laughable. I felt nothing. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "Elena's just a neighbor to me. Remember what you said." Marcus, satisfied, spat out a few more threats and left. As he reached the alley entrance, 7 or 8 guys materialized, falling in around him as they walked away. Time flew. Before I knew it, finals for the spring semester of junior year were upon us. These exams were crucial, a gateway to senior year and college applications. Everyone was cramming, desperate for a strong finish. Everyone except Elena. When Marcus was at his off-campus street dance classes, she'd mostly sleep at her desk, completely uninterested in studying. Only when Marcus returned would she perk up, sidling next to him, their affection on full display for anyone to see or ignore. Teachers talked to her several times, but instead of reining it in, she became more brazen, openly skipping class more and more. Other students mentioned seeing her at the dance studio Marcus frequented. Elena had always been pretty and vivacious. With her good grades and outgoing personality, she'd had many friends, including quite a few secret admirers. Since getting with Marcus, not only had her grades plummeted, but her possessiveness and jealousy had led to fights with other girls. She'd even threatened to get outside toughs to teach them a lesson, adopting a full-blown bad girl persona. Many classmates felt sorry for her, watching this dramatic change, but with the heavy academic pressure, no one had the energy to pay her much attention, myself included. She'd gone from being a class celebrity to an invisible nobody. Even the teachers, deeply disappointed, stopped trying to steer her back to the right path and just let her be. The day before finals, the school canceled evening study hall. I was walking home as usual, letting the cold winter wind clear my head. Elena was standing at the entrance to our neighborhood, blocking my way. "Julian." It was the first time in 2 lifetimes she'd hesitated speaking to me. I guessed it was about Marcus. I didn't say anything, just waited. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. I wondered how long she'd been waiting. I suddenly remembered how she used to complain about being cold after we married in the other life. I'd moved us south to a place where it was warm year-round just for her. Elena took a deep breath. "Lend me some money." "What?" I was stunned. Elena's parents, like mine, had stable corporate jobs. They'd always been generous with her, their only daughter. Why would you need to borrow money from me? Then it hit me. Her recent behavior must have been too much for her parents, so they'd cut off her allowance. Elena tried to hide her embarrassment. Marcus passed the open auditions. "Next week, I'm going with him to LA for the callback for that TV dance competition." I nodded, said nothing. I pulled out my wallet, took out the $100 my parents had given me for the week, and handed it all to her. 100. That's all I have on me right now. Elena blinked, surprised I'd given it to her so easily. I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. You thought wrong, I said with a small smile. Elena stared into my eyes, looking like she wanted to say more. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. I gestured towards the neighborhood entrance behind her. Can I go now? Marcus is amazing, she said, a sudden intensity in her voice. He's going to make his dream come true. I managed another smile. Well, good luck to you both. For the second time, Elena said thanks, and she finally stepped aside. As we passed each other, we walked in completely opposite directions. After a few steps, I stopped, an inexplicable urge making me turn back. I saw her in the distance, disappearing down the street, wrapped in Marcus's embrace. After 2 grueling days of finals, my parents wanted me to relax, book plane tickets for a beach vacation. We had just landed when Mom's phone rang. It was Elena's mother. What? Elena's missing. Mom's voice rose in alarm, catching my attention. Don't panic, maybe she's just at a friend's house. I trailed beside her, pulling my luggage, listening silently. What? And over $200 are gone, too? Don't jump to conclusions. If Elena took the money, it means she planned this. Maybe she just went off with friends to blow off steam. She's probably not in any danger. Mom spent a long time calming Mrs. Hayes. After hanging up, as we left the airport, she suddenly asked me, Julian, do you have any idea where Elena might be? 20-odd years of friendship had made our parents practically family. Mom was naturally worried about Elena. I looked into her concerned eyes and told her the truth. Elena had probably gone with a classmate to an out-of-state competition. Mom believed me and immediately called Mrs. Hayes back to relay what I'd said. With such turmoil back home, my parents couldn't really enjoy the vacation. We cut it short and rushed back. Only then did we learn Elena's parents had reported her missing to the police. In just 3 or 4 days, they seemed to have aged 10 years. A week later, one morning I was coming back from buying breakfast for my parents. As I passed Elena's apartment, I noticed their door was ajar. I could hear a furious argument, a sharp slap. Then the door flew open and Elena burst out. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she'd been traveling rough, and one side of her face was bright red, swollen like a ripe fruit. She froze when she saw me, then quickly ran downstairs. From inside, I heard Mrs. Hayes's heartbroken sobs. I went upstairs and told my parents what I'd seen. Oh, that Elena. Mom sighed, shaking her head. Dad did, too. We watched her grow up. She used to be such a sensible girl. How did she suddenly become so reckless? They were too upset to eat and went downstairs to be with Elena's parents. I heard from classmates that Marcus hadn't made the cut. His dancing might have been impressive in our small town, but on a professional stage, it wasn't anything special. Elena was brought back by her parents the next day. My parents told me they'd found her in a cramped, dingy little apartment, making breakfast for her boyfriend. Her hands were burned from splattering oil, a testament to her inexperience. What a shame, Mom lamented. Your Auntie Carol always treated Elena like a princess, never let her lift a finger. And now, instead of focusing on school, she's run off to wait on someone else. She quickly exchanged a worried glance with Dad. They both looked at me, afraid I'd be upset. In our parents' eyes, Elena and I were a foregone conclusion. They'd always assumed we'd get married and have kids after graduation. I didn't react much, just turned up the volume on my English listening practice, burying myself in my textbooks. My parents looked at each other, then quietly left my room. After my rebirth, I had a new plan for my life, new goals requiring even more effort. I focused on myself, but I couldn't help piecing together Elena's situation from my parents' hushed conversations. After being brought back, Elena fought with her parents daily. She was obsessed with dropping out of school, getting a job to support Marcus's dreams. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes couldn't bear to watch their daughter throw her bright future away, but no matter how much they pleaded or scolded, Elena wouldn't listen. Desperate, they resorted to the most direct method, locking Elena in her room. That only made Elena more defiant. She threatened suicide. And then what happened? Mom was talking about Elena at dinner, her voice trailing off. I picked up my food and, for the first time in ages, actually asked. Mom put down her chopsticks, sighing heavily. Elena wasn't seriously hurt, but when her parents took her to the hospital, She used a bathroom break as a chance to run off with that boy again. No one knew where Elena had gone. Elena's name gradually stopped coming up at our dinner table. Mom, while feeling sorry for her, also harbored a sliver of relief. At least such a rebellious, headstrong girl hadn't ended up marrying into our family. The next time I heard about Elena was after midterms in the first semester of senior year. During a break, I saw Elena and her parents at the entrance to the admin building. It was early fall, still hot. Elena was wearing a thin, loose-fitting top, but I could still see the change in her figure. After all, in my previous life, I'd been by her side through both her pregnancies, even though those children weren't mine. Sure enough, that evening I overheard my parents talking about Elena again. Pregnant? Looks like 3 or 4 months along. Too late for an abortion, bad for her health. They have to keep it. What else can they do? Besides, her dropping out. Is she really going to take the SATs while taking care of a baby? Noticing I was home, Mom abruptly stopped talking and hurried to the kitchen to make me a late snack. Only Dad looked at me, sighing helplessly. The second semester of senior year, with college entrance exams looming, everyone threw themselves into preparing for life's first major battle. Having lived through it once, the SATs and finals didn't terrify me, but I still gave it my all. My phone was old. At the start of the semester, my parents bought me a new one. They trusted me not to get distracted and hoped it would ease my stress. I mostly used it to drill more practice questions. My only social app was WhatsApp. The moment I logged in, a notification popped up in my empty chat list. This user has sent you a friend request. From the backlit silhouette of the profile picture, I recognized Elena. After she and Marcus went public in class, she'd immediately deleted me. I couldn't believe that after a year she was adding me back. I didn't accept, but an impulse made me tap on her Instagram profile. It was still public, just like before, allowing me an easy glimpse into her recent life. She posted frequently, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, mostly about her and Marcus, holding hands, hugging, selfies together, eating out, videos of Marcus dancing. Her most recent posts were selfies of them at a night market, bathed in neon lights. It was early March. Northern nights were still frigid. She was bundled in an oversized parka, snuggled against him, her smile looking sweet, but the caption read, "Cute handmade trinkets, for $1. See you at the night market." I zoomed in. The foreground showed a corner of a craft stall. Doing the math, she must have given birth not long ago. Even a working mom would be on maternity leave, but she wasn't resting at home. She was out selling stuff at a market stall. I glanced at the time. PM. For some reason, a fleeting urge to go to the night market to see for myself flickered within me. Thankfully, it died as quickly as it came. I put down my phone and, since it was still early, dove back into a set of physics problems. Time passed, neither fast nor slow. Once again, I faced the SATs and final exams. I performed as expected. After my last exam, leaving the testing center, the familiar scene made me pause, a momentary daze. In my past life, Elena and I had been at the same testing site, different rooms. After finishing, I'd found her immediately, swept her up in my arms, and spun her around in excitement, oblivious to everyone else. She'd been relaxed then, letting me hold her, even letting me steal a light kiss on her cheek in my euphoria. "Julian, my man, how do you do?" My desk mate, who'd been in a different exam room, broke my reverie. I smiled, picked up the thread of conversation, and we walked off together. That past, those memories, were gradually blurring. After exams, my parents presented several vacation options. I chose none. First, I slept solidly for 2 days and nights. Then, since Dad had time off, I went with him to his hometown, staying with my grandparents for a few days. I'd always loved country life, and my grandparents' unrestrained spoiling made me want to stay forever. But after just a few days, I got a call from my desk mate. Elena was getting married. He said he wanted us to go back for her wedding. Hearing the news, I expected some emotional reaction, but my heart was as calm as a summer breeze, not a ripple. A few classmates and I arranged to go together. The address on the invitation was Elena's current home, Marcus's family place. After my rebirth, I'd imagined various lives for Elena, but I never thought her destination would be here. We took a train, then a bus. When public transport ran out, we hitchhiked on a local farmer's beat-up pickup truck, finally arriving at Elena's new home just before noon. Entering the village, We saw a red balloon arch, impressive from a distance. Up close, we saw the houses behind it were just two old, modest brick buildings. The yard, however, was large, teemed with groups of local relatives and friends. As I stepped into the yard, my eyes immediately found the bride in a white dress. Elena seemed to sense me. She turned, and her eyes met mine. "Oh, Marcus's friends are here. Quick, come on in." Marcus's relatives warmly ushered us into the yard. Step by step, I drew closer to her. I could see her wedding dress was cheap, plainly designed, and didn't even fit properly. Loose at the shoulders but tied around her waist and stomach. It hit me instantly. She was pregnant again. Elena noticed my gaze and instinctively covered her belly with the red full-leather clutch she was holding. My eyes unconsciously drifted up to her face. I couldn't deny it. My heart lurched. Shock. On that familiar face, I found no trace of the Elena I knew. Cheap makeup couldn't hide her dull, rough skin, the fatigue in her eyes, the fine lines around her mouth. They screamed of a hard life. She was only 20, yet she looked as worn as someone in her 30s or 40s. No, in my past life, under my care with the expensive, high-end skincare I'd bought her, her skin at 36 was still baby smooth. Her students preferred to call her by her first name, like an older sister. Perhaps my stare was too direct. Marcus, in a black suit, stepped in front of me. After returning from Elena's wedding, I received my acceptance letter from my dream university. This time, I'd applied for a completely different major. In my past life, to accommodate Elena, I'd chosen her preferred university in a major I disliked, but which had excellent prospects, so I could give her a better life after graduation. This time, I decided to live for myself. I enrolled in a top-tier med school, fulfilling my own dream of healing others. My parents were incredibly proud. They booked a large restaurant downtown for a grand send-off party, inviting all our relatives and friends. Elena's parents attended. It had been a while. Elena's mother, once a pleasantly plump woman with a cheerful round face that radiated good fortune, was now rail-thin, her hair streaked with gray. "Julian," Mrs. Hayes said, patting my shoulder. "I've always known you were an exceptional young man. Congratulations." Her gesture strangely reminded me of my wedding to Elena in the past life. She patted my shoulder then, too, smiling as she told me to start calling her mom. Looking at me, Mrs. Hayes fell into a long silence. Finally, her eyes red, she sighed softly. If only she hadn't taken the wrong path. Perhaps she would be like you today, accepted into her dream college on a completely different journey. I started college, diving into demanding studies and extracurriculars. I rarely heard Elena's name anymore. When I occasionally thought of her, she felt increasingly like a stranger. I joined the university's debate team, just as I'd always wanted. In my past life, I'd loved the thrill of verbal sparring, the satisfaction of defending my views and winning, but back then, Elena hadn't liked me joining debate. She'd always said she preferred I focus on being healthy, suggesting the hip-hop dance club instead. I had zero interest in music or dance and was inevitably cut during tryouts. Having missed the debate team selections too, I lost interest in any clubs for the rest of my college years. Thankfully, this life I could live for myself without considering anyone else's opinion. Midway through the first semester, our department hosted a debate competition. I earned a spot as the third speaker in the finals. The opposing team's third speaker and I went head-to-head. Towards the end, perhaps due to their insufficient preparation, I systematically dismantled her arguments. The other third speaker, a girl, was left speechless, her fair face flushed pink, her bright eyes wide like a startled kitten. At that moment, standing at the podium, I couldn't help but chuckle. Ultimately, our team won the championship. It was clear the other team had been gunning for the title too, but unfortunately for them, they ran into us. Afterward, my teammates and I left the auditorium full of youthful triumph. The four debaters from the opposing team trailed behind us, their energy noticeably dimmer, except for that third speaker, Chloe Davis. She kept glaring at me with those round, bright eyes. Finding it amusing, I glanced back at her a few times. My face must have really annoyed her, so much so that she wasn't watching where she was going. She missed a step and tumbled down the stairs. I wasn't far from her, and being taller, I managed to catch her just in time, saving her from a nasty fall. When Chloe scrambled out of my arms, her dark eyes were a mix of anger, embarrassment, and a touch of confusion. She then fled, practically bolting as if I were the big bad wolf. The debate competition ended and life returned to its usual rhythm. Med school courses were incredibly demanding. My days were a loop. Dorm, classroom, cafeteria, library. I don't know when it started, but I began noticing Chloe Davis everywhere I went. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but after a few awkward hellos, Chloe started on her own accord to become friendly. In large lectures, or at the library, she'd always save me a prime seat. In the cafeteria, she'd diligently get my food, saving me from long lines, even getting my favorite dishes. In my 2 lifetimes, she was the only girl besides Elena I'd ever grown close to. I realized I was clueless about interacting with girls and could only awkwardly reciprocate her kindness. I'd buy snacks for her dorm, take her out to dinner or to the movies, even an amusement park once. Back and forth we grew closer. Then, absurdly, as the seasons changed at the end of the semester, I caught a nasty cold. Chloe somehow convinced the RA, claiming to be my girlfriend, and came to my dorm room for several days to take care of me, even braving a downpour to buy me medicine. I recovered, but she almost got sick herself. My roommates started jokingly calling her Mrs. Miller. It was only then I belatedly realized she was pursuing me. After Elena's betrayal, I was hesitant to start a new relationship. Besides, Chloe's cheerful, outgoing personality was so much like the Elena of old. But I knew Chloe was her own person. I shouldn't see her as anyone else. That wouldn't be fair to her. The first semester of freshman year ended, and the long winter break arrived. Our interactions stopped abruptly. Back home, I realized my heart felt empty. It was then I knew I'd already fallen for this girl who was as warm and bright as the sun. February, Valentine's Day, also happened to be New Year's Day that year. I managed to snag a train ticket and headed straight to her city. When she saw me standing downstairs from her apartment building, she gasped and rushed into my arms without a second thought. We were officially together. We spent the whole day exploring her city, even doing nothing. Even with the biting winter wind, we felt warm and happy. After dinner, I reluctantly said goodbye and took the late train back home. The next morning I woke up late. Elena's parents were already at our house for a holiday visit. My dad and Mr. Hayes were having tea in the living room, while Mrs. Hayes was in the kitchen with my mom, chatting as they prepped vegetables. I went to the dining room looking for breakfast and saw a stack of pancakes Mom had left for me, still warm. I grabbed a fork and started eating, unintentionally overhearing Mrs. Hayes' troubles. It was the first I'd heard about Elena in 6 months. Elena's having a rough time. She's had 2 daughters in a row, the second one premature. It's taken a toll on her health. Her mother-in-law isn't easy to get along with either, doesn't like Elena, and especially doesn't like her granddaughters. Won't help watch them for a single day. I offered to help, but Elena's too stubborn to come back and let me. That Marcus Thorne, he's all looks and no substance, no sense of responsibility, no skills, can't even hold down a steady job, unwilling to work hard. Mr. Hayes pulled strings to find him a job, and he quit after less than a day. Our poor Elena, her father and I raised her like a princess. Now she's got to take care of 2 kids and work to support the family. As her mother, it breaks my heart to see it. My mom was wiping her eyes along with Mrs. Hayes, clearly pained by Elena's situation. Listening to Mrs. Hayes, I drifted off for a moment. Elena, she was reborn, yet she chose such a difficult path. Did she regret it? Just then, the piece of pancake I was holding slipped and landed on the side of the plate with a clink. Elena's mother finally noticed I was there. She wiped her tears, came out of the kitchen, and looked at me with a sigh. Back then, everyone in the neighborhood thought you and Elena were meant to be childhood sweethearts, so close. If you 2 had ended up together, how wonderful that would have been. I didn't see the point in her saying that. I smiled and cut her off. Mrs. Hayes, I have a girlfriend now. Next year for the holidays, I'll bring her over to visit you and Mr. Hayes. Elena's mother looked at me with a complicated expression for a long moment, then managed an awkward smile and returned to the kitchen to chat with my mom. Their topic of conversation, however, no longer involved Elena. The second half of sophomore year, my dad got a promotion and transfer. Our whole family moved to the state capital. To scrape together money for a house in a new city, we sold our old place to a distant relative. Our ties with Elena's family gradually faded. During senior year, over winter break, I went to the train station to pick up Chloe, who was coming to meet my parents. I was nervous, but the moment they met her, my parents adored her. Chloe was pretty, cute, lively, and smart, incredibly charming. At dinner, Mom couldn't stop praising Chloe, saying the more she looked at her, the more she liked her. I feigned displeasure. Mom, you can't just praise her. It's the holidays. Praise me a little too. Mom laughed and served me the best piece of fish. Yes, yes, you deserve praise too. My son has excellent taste, bringing home such a wonderful daughter-in-law. Chloe's fair cheeks instantly blushed a lovely crimson. I'd already met Chloe's parents and asked their permission for her to stay at our place for a few nights. That evening, Mom changed the sheets in my room to a brand new set and unceremoniously tossed my comforter onto the living room sofa. I'm telling you, Chloe is a good girl. You absolutely cannot take advantage of her. Chloe, overhearing Mom's warning, grinned mischievously at me, winking. Seeing her playful look, I wanted to playfully bite her. The moment Mom laughed, Chloe quickly locked the door, leaving me alone in the living room staring blankly at the ceiling. The next day was our high school class reunion. I'd received the invitation a couple of weeks prior. Unexpectedly, Chloe wanted to come with me, saying she wanted to hear from my old classmates what I used to be like. She was always up to something mischievous, and I was happy to have her company. At the hotel restaurant, Chloe said she needed to use the restroom to touch up her makeup. While waiting for her by the entrance, I saw a couple walking towards me from a distance. As I got closer, I realized the man was Marcus Thorne and the woman was Elena. Years had passed. Elena looked even older, the exhaustion on her face undeniable. It was hard to believe she and Chloe were the same age. They looked a generation apart. Julian. Elena murmured my name. Marcus immediately shot her a harsh glare. Elena flinched, then forced a smile to hide her discomfort. Go buy me a pack of cigarettes, Marcus ordered her rudely. Elena didn't respond, but even though she tried to hide it, I saw the fear in her eyes when she looked at Marcus. What are you waiting for? Hurry up. Elena nodded meekly and walked towards the hotel entrance. With her gone, Marcus's hostility towards me intensified. He looked me up and down, a cold sneer revealing slightly yellow teeth. Julian Miller, long time no see. Huh, Mr. Valedictorian? He used to be the king of the campus, arrogant and handsome. Now he was the same person, but with none of the swaggering confidence. I merely nodded. I know, was my only response. Marcus, dissatisfied with my reaction, suddenly stepped closer, staring hard into my eyes. Julian, let me tell you, forget any ideas you have. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. Elena's my wife for life. She's given me 2 kids. If you're waiting for her, try the next lifetime. His pathetic posturing was so ridiculous I couldn't help but chuckle. Marcus clenched his fists but ultimately didn't dare swing at me. Just then, Chloe came out of the restroom. Smart as she was, she immediately sensed the tension between Marcus and me. She quickly linked her arm through mine, cooing, Julian, aren't you going to introduce me? Who's this? I smiled. This is a high school classmate, Marcus Thorne. Marcus, this is my girlfriend, Chloe. As the words left my mouth, I noticed Elena returning from outside falter in her steps. Marcus noticed Elena too. He impatiently snatched the cigarette pack from her hand and lit one up. Chloe, seemingly oblivious to the strange atmosphere, continued, What colleges do you guys go to? You must be seniors like us, right? Thinking about grad school. Elena and Marcus remained silent. Julian and I decided against grad school. Chloe chatted easily, but we're planning to study abroad next fall. Marcus could only puff frequently on his cigarette to hide his discomfort. Eventually, Elena made an excuse and hurried upstairs, not forgetting to pull a pale-faced Marcus along with her. Watching them retreat, Chloe winked slyly at me, took my hand, and we walked into our reunion's private room. By the time the reunion ended, it was evening. Chloe and I walked hand in hand down the brightly lit street. Julian, your taste in women back then was really something else. How did you know? I could face that past life with Elena calmly now, but I had no idea how this clever girl knew I'd once loved her. Chloe didn't answer directly, just pinched my side hard. I laughed. I think I smell a strong whiff of jealousy. Did you knock over the vinegar bottle at the party? Chloe jumped, sniffing her clothes frantically, then realized I was teasing her. She knew my weak spot, playfully pinching the ticklish spot on my waist. It didn't hurt, just tickled. I laughed, dodging her expertly. The little rascal stomped her foot. I'm not jealous. Not at all. After graduating smoothly from college, Chloe and I went abroad together for further studies. In a foreign land where we knew no one, we became each other's rock and motivation. We moved in together, studying hard while building a vibrant little life for ourselves. 3 years didn't diminish our feelings. Instead, it made us inseparable. Both sets of parents had long since accepted our relationship. After finishing our studies and returning home, I'd barely secured a job when our four parents eagerly began planning a grand wedding for us. The wedding invitations went out to all our close classmates and friends. To my surprise, Elena and Marcus also came. Elena seemed to have made an effort to dress up for my wedding, but even heavy makeup couldn't hide her withered appearance and fragile, dejected spirit. Marcus held Elena's hand from the start, trying to project an image of marital bliss, but anyone could see it wasn't genuine. During the toasts, I raised my glass and downed it in one go. Classmates teased me about my tolerance, then raised their own glasses. I noticed, under Elena's arm as she lifted her glass, 2 or 3 overlapping scars, old and new, extending up into her sleeve. After the toasts, I mentioned it to Chloe, now my wife. She wasn't unreasonable. She knew I told her because I simply wanted to help a woman trapped in a cycle of domestic violence, nothing more. A short while later, Chloe found an opportunity to speak with Elena alone in the restroom. Elena, if you need help, you can talk to me. Julian and I can help you. After the reception, back in our new home, Chloe finally had a chance to tell me about Elena. Elena had looked at her with a complex mix of suspicion, nervousness, fear, regret, and deep unwillingness. But in the end, she said nothing and had quietly left my wedding. At some point, my honeymoon leave over, I officially began my sacred work in medicine. My wife also started setting up her own design studio. Despite my advanced degrees, I had little practical experience and had to start from the bottom. I began to truly understand what it meant to be run off my feet. I saw Elena again a few months later. I was on call in the ER that night when a woman groaning in pain was wheeled in. My colleagues and I rushed her aside. Her belly was huge. She was pregnant, but a large, shocking bruise covered her abdomen and blood was seeping out from under her, soaking the gurney pad. An examination revealed her baby was already 8 months along. Working with the OB team, we managed to save the baby's life. A girl, tiny and wrinkled, waving her small, clenched fists as if greeting this strange new world. Sadly, there was no joyous family to welcome her, no maternal affection, only the sterile incubator in the NICU. After the baby was born, the bleeding in Elena's uterus wouldn't stop. The doctors present raced against time and decided on the only life-saving option, a hysterectomy. I was tasked with informing her family. When I stepped out of the OR, I was stunned to see Marcus Thorne standing there, someone I hadn't seen in ages. He looked surprised to see me, too. How is Elena? He stammered. Elena. Right. I'd been so focused on emergency treatment that I hadn't taken a close look at the pale face under the sweat-drenched, matted hair. I hadn't realized the woman was Elena. I remember my mother mentioning in passing that Elena had moved to this big city, seeking more opportunities to provide for her children. I never imagined we'd meet again like this in this vast city. I explained Elena's critical situation to Marcus. He hesitated for a long time without giving an answer. Every second you delay, Elena is in more danger, I urged. No, it wasn't Marcus who finally spoke, but an old woman who had rushed over, positioning herself between us. A hysterectomy? No, I won't allow it. Looking at her face, I vaguely recalled seeing her at Elena's wedding. It was Marcus's mother. I just saw. Another girl, another money pit. If she can't give me a grandson, she can keep trying. If you remove her uterus, what's she going to use to get pregnant? No, you can't do it. The old woman was aggressive and domineering. She turned to her son, warning sternly. I'm telling you, don't you dare sign. A nurse came out of the OR, urging that the patient's condition was critical. They needed a signature immediately. Looking at the adamant mother and son, I felt an immense sadness for Elena lying on the operating table battling death. I asked the nurse to stay in the hallway to distract Marcus and his mother while I quickly contacted Elena's parents through my mother. Fortunately, Mrs. Hayes, now retired, had also moved to the city in the past couple of years to help her struggling daughter. Soon my mom and Mrs. Hayes arrived at the hospital. Supported by my mother, Mrs. Hayes signed the consent form with a trembling hand. When Marcus's mother saw she couldn't stop Elena's mother, she started yelling and screaming, throwing a tantrum, trying to disrupt the medical staff's efforts to save Elena. Eventually, she and Marcus were escorted out of the hospital by security. Hours later, Elena's life was finally saved. After getting Chloe's consent, I paid for a private nurse for Elena and covered her medical bills. However, I never once appeared before Elena. Neither Marcus nor his mother ever came to the hospital to see her again. Those two are like ghouls. I'd sometimes hear the more sentimental young nurses say about Elena in bed 3. No matter what, there's still a baby in the incubator. Don't they even care about the child? But I never joined their discussions. In my eyes, Elena was just a patient. Perhaps her life was indeed unfortunate, but I was just an ordinary doctor. I could heal the sick and injured, but I could never save their decaying, broken lives. Elena was discharged quietly. Since I'd been covering her medical expenses, I imagined her departure was smooth. The premature baby, after her condition stabilized, had been released from the incubator and taken home by Elena's parents. I never saw that child again. A little over a year later, my wife and I had our own child. Around 4 or 5 months into her pregnancy, Chloe had a checkup at our hospital. A colleague carefully took several ultrasound pictures for her. Before the new year, Chloe and I went to my parents' house for dinner. Mom was looking at the ultrasound pics over and over. Tisk, TSK. Look at that tiny face, those beautiful features, just like Julian when he was little. Hearing Mom's words, I gently touched Chloe's growing belly, unable to hide my excitement and anticipation. I'd always loved children, and now in my second lifetime, I finally had a child that was truly mine. During dinner, watching Chloe and me interact lovingly, Mom couldn't help but sigh softly. Seeing you two so happy together, I feel incredibly fortunate. Thank goodness you and Elena were both young back then, and your father and I didn't rush to push you together. She mentioned Elena again. My wife and I exchanged a glance. That Elena, she was always stubborn, even as a child. Chose a path and wouldn't turn back until she hit a dead end. Unfortunately, now that she wants to turn back, it's too late for everything. It turned out that when Elena, heavily pregnant, was injured and hospitalized and the baby was born prematurely, it was because her husband Marcus, in a drunken rage, had kicked her in the stomach. Having faced death, Elena finally resolved to divorce him after being discharged. But as soon as she returned home, she overheard Marcus and his mother plotting to seize her parents' old house. When they saw her, Marcus's mother initially feigned concern, but her words were all about coercing Elena into helping them take her parents' property. The people Elena felt she'd wronged most in her life were her parents. How could she agree to such a shameless demand from this mother and son? Marcus, who had always expected his wife to put him first, the wife who had always been meek and submissive, couldn't believe she dared to refuse him. Without any prompting from his mother, he slapped Elena across the face. A spark of the pride from her former life as a favored daughter still flickered within Elena. Utterly disillusioned, she fought back against her husband's violence for the first time. Perhaps years of resentment had seeped into her bones, or perhaps chronic alcoholism had weakened Marcus's body. Elena, despite just being out of the hospital, mustered all her strength and finally subdued her husband, rendering him unable to stand, unable to continue lording over her, using her as a punching bag. Marcus's mother, seeing her son bloody and motionless, nearly went mad and fled. Neighbors helped call the police. When the police arrived, Elena had calmly rinsed herself in the bathroom. Her usually messy hair was tied back neatly, revealing a forehead now etched with fine lines. The neighbors then realized that beneath the overly thin face and pale skin covered in bruises, this poor woman, constantly bullied by her husband and mother-in-law, was actually very beautiful. Elena went to prison. Chloe and I used our connections to find a well-known lawyer in the state. Through my parents, we introduced him to Elena's parents. The lawyer did his utmost to defend her, and Elena ultimately received a 6-year sentence. It was the best possible outcome. It was a beautiful spring day. I had a rare day off, but I had to accompany my wife to the hospital for her routine prenatal checkup. Her OB colleague said our baby would arrive in a little over a month. Leaving the hospital, we first stopped at a baby store to buy more little clothes and toys for our impending arrival. Before we got home, I received a call from Elena's father. He said Elena wanted to see me. I didn't want to go, but then it struck me that the entanglement between Elena and me, spanning 2 lifetimes, needed some kind of closure, so I agreed. Today was visiting day, and it was my rare day off. After discussing it with Chloe, we didn't go home, but drove directly to the suburban prison. After registering and going through multiple checkpoints, we entered the visitation room. Elena was already sitting behind the glass wall, waiting. When she saw me, she instinctively started to rise, then slumped back down. I sat opposite her and picked up the receiver. Her dry lips trembled. Her voice was hoarse, choked with emotion. Julian, I'm sorry. I regret it. I smiled faintly. It's all in the past. It had been a long time since I'd dwelled on my previous life, but looking at her face, memories inevitably surfaced. I remembered how I used to have endless things to tell her about work, about life, even trivial things like sneezing twice on the way to the office. Her expression was always indifferent. Only if something interested her would she chat a bit. I thought then that she'd grown up, matured, and that's why she'd become less talkative. I'd even tried all sorts of ways to make her happy, just hoping she'd talk to me more. But I never knew that from the very beginning she had never loved me, so everything I said was just unbearable noise to her. Now, the Elena behind the glass, her dull eyes filled with unspoken words, held no mystery I wished to explore. I waited a moment. When she still didn't speak, a trace of impatience stirred in me. Let me, I thought. I hung up the phone and stood to leave. Suddenly, she shot up, banging hard on the glass wall, yelling for me to come back. The glass was soundproof. I only realized what was happening when I saw a guard in the corner move. Turning back, I saw her being forcibly pushed back in her seat. I had no choice but to sit down again. The guard, seeing she had calmed down, released her and returned to his post. She watched me pick up the phone, her eyes boring into mine, desperate and frantic as she questioned me through the receiver. Julian, you were reborn too, weren't you? You were reborn too, right? I looked in her eyes, noncommittal. It must be. Otherwise, why don't you love me this lifetime? Why didn't you save me? What? Seeing her hysterical state, I almost wanted to laugh, but I answered her seriously. Everyone in this world has to be responsible for their own choices. In the last life, I chose you, and I paid with my life. In this life, you chose Marcus Thorne, so you have to bear the consequences. A ray of sunlight streamed through a small window in the wall, landing precisely on Elena's face, so pale it was almost translucent. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the shadow of the lovely young girl she once was. She didn't speak for a long time. The receiver slipped from her hand, but she didn't seem to notice, just stared at me blankly. This time, after hanging up, I stood up and left without looking back. The parking lot was a bit of a walk. I followed a road towards the car. In the distance, I saw Chloe waiting by the car. She saw me too, waved, her usually bored expression instantly lighting up with a vibrant glow. I quickened my pace, eventually breaking into a run. The sun was dazzling, the spring breeze gentle. The person I loved was waiting for me ahead. The shackles that had bound me were finally cast off. Step by step, on the path I had chosen, my feet had never felt so light. Elena never thought she'd see Marcus Thorne again. The day she was reborn, she received the love note he'd written her. The bold black letters were simple and direct. Be my girlfriend. After 2 lifetimes, to hear his proposal again, Elena could find no reason to refuse. In front of the whole class, she said yes. To see Marcus again, Elena felt everything she did was worth it. She gave up the academic achievements she'd been so proud of in her past life, gave up her promising future. She wanted nothing else but to walk through this life hand in hand with Marcus. So, not long after they started dating, Elena gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. To support his trip to LA for the dance competition, she swallowed her pride and asked Julian, with whom she'd already drawn a clear line, for money, even stealing cash from home. But unfortunately, Marcus was eliminated in the very first round of callbacks. Elena couldn't bear to see him dejected. She promised him that no matter what, she would always support him. Whatever he needed, she was willing to give. Unfortunately, her parents soon caught her and brought her home. To stop her from being with Marcus, they cruelly locked her in a room. She managed to escape by faking a suicide attempt and going to the hospital, But this left her with no way back. What she didn't know was that Marcus, always so proud of his dance skills, could never quite accept his failure. A seed of resentment began to grow in his heart. If she hadn't been clinging to him every day, how could he have gotten distracted? How could he have lost the opportunity that was practically his? They still moved in together, into Marcus's small rented room. In her past life, Julian had never let Elena do a single chore. Now, having to manage all the mundane tasks herself, she found a strange joy in it. But she and Marcus were young, jobless, and soon money became tight. Marcus spent less and less time at home. When Elena asked where he went, he'd snap back before she could finish. Where? Where else could I go? Obviously trying to figure out how to get some money. Then he'd slam the door and leave. Elena didn't blame him. She only blamed herself for not being able to solve their predicament. After a while, Elena started feeling unwell. One night, she couldn't bear it anymore. Marcus wasn't home. She called all his friends before finally reaching him. Before his friend could hand Marcus the phone, Elena heard his voice through the deafening music in the background. What girlfriend? If I hadn't made that bet with you guys back then, I never would have gone after her. Who knew she'd be so easy? Too bad she's got nothing but a pretty face. Sooner or later. Marcus, his friend interrupted sharply, handing over the phone. Marcus saw the caller ID. Elena. He reluctantly answered. Why are you calling here? Elena wasn't sick. She was pregnant. She hadn't known in the early stages and hadn't taken care of herself, leading to an unstable pregnancy. Since it was already a few months along, an abortion was risky. She had to keep the baby. Preventing a miscarriage and nourishing her body both cost money. Desperate, she had no choice but to contact her parents. After a huge fight, her parents were the first to compromise. Her mother took her to the school to handle the withdrawal procedures. It was during a class break. From a distance, Elena saw Julian in her class line. She hadn't seen him in months. He was taller, thinner. Elena suddenly realized he was actually better looking than Marcus, and the hatred and disgust she once felt for Julian had vanished. She didn't know when. Throughout her pregnancy, Elena took care of herself. Marcus was often not home. Elena didn't ask, and he didn't say where he went. The day before she went into labor, Marcus's mother finally showed up at the hospital with a basket of eggs. One morning, Elena gave birth to a lovely daughter. When a nurse brought the baby out of the delivery room, Marcus's mother heard it was a girl, didn't even glance at her, turned and left the hospital, not forgetting to take the basket of eggs with her. When the baby was 4 or 5 months old, Elena and Marcus finally got married. The wedding was held at Marcus's family home in the countryside, simple and crude. Only then did Elena learn that Marcus's mother was just a vegetable seller. She had already spent everything she had to support Marcus's studies in the city and his dance lessons. Her mother-in-law had always looked down on Elena, not only hating her for corrupting her son, but also despising her for not being able to produce a male heir. Even in front of village relatives and guests, her mother-in-law didn't give Elena a pleasant look. What Elena hadn't expected was to see Julian at the wedding. She frantically covered her once again pregnant belly, only to turn and see Marcus's defiant gaze directed at Julian. So, it was Marcus who had invited him. After being with Marcus for over a year, he hadn't achieved anything significant in any aspect. Yet the arrogance in his bones became even more undisguised. He led Elena over to Julian, speaking in a voice only the three of them could hear. Julian, so what if you got into a fancy college? The woman you like is still having my kids. Elena was mortified, but what was even harder for her to accept was that Julian, whose eyes once held only her, now looked at Marcus's provocation with eyes as calm and deep as an old well, without a ripple of emotion. After having 2 children, the financial burden on the family grew heavier. Marcus couldn't do anything, nor was he willing to. Apart from occasionally asking his mother for some living expenses, Elena had to support all other household costs by working odd jobs. Only then did she realize that during her pregnancy, Marcus's daily outings weren't to earn money but to drink and fool around with his degenerate friends. The money he brought home was just what Elena's mother secretly gave them, unable to bear seeing her daughter suffer. Marcus drank more and more frequently. At some point, he started losing his temper after drinking. Their 2 daughters were often terrified into tears by their father's ferocious appearance. But Marcus didn't care at all. Elena could only protect her daughters, and try her best to maintain his image in their hearts. Marcus didn't appreciate it. One day, drunk, he beat her viciously, venting all his resentment from over the years. Elena was stunned. She never imagined that abandoning everything, even herself, to be with him would result in his hatred. Finally, during one of Marcus's escalating violent outbursts, Elena, heavily pregnant, was beaten so badly she ended up in a hospital. After a tense emergency rescue, her life was barely saved. One night in the hospital, Elena woke from a nightmare, her pillow soaked with tears. In her dream, Julian, she, and the children were in their once spacious and bright home, filled with laughter and joy, time passing peacefully and beautifully. In the darkness, she fumbled for her phone with trembling hands and dialed a number she had never forgotten. A cold, mechanical female voice reminded her that the man who had once loved her to the bone had long since been killed by her own hands. Elena covered her face and wept. She stayed in the hospital for over a month. Marcus and her mother-in-law never visited her once. Her own mother took care of her tirelessly. Elena knew she had failed her parents' upbringing and expectations in this life. Yet she had to make even more unreasonable requests. Having walked through the gates of hell and back, Elena was completely sobered. Each act of weakness had only brought more severe abuse. She begged her mother to temporarily care for her premature third child. She herself was determined to go back and divorce Marcus, then take her eldest and second child and escape that terrible home. Elena dragged her weak, recovering body home, only to hear that mother and son plotting to take her parents' old house. Anyway, she can't have any more kids. We'll have to divorce her sooner or later. Might as well get our hands on her parents' house now. She's their only daughter. Her parents will leave it to her eventually. What's hers is yours. Her mother-in-law's eyes glinted with greed as she schemed. Spotting Elena, her expression didn't even change. You're back just in time. Marcus and I were just discussing moving into your parents' house. This place is too small, too crowded for a whole family. Anyway, your parents are just two old people. They can rent a small apartment somewhere. Her mother-in-law chatted on, accustomed to ordering Elena around, actually believing Elena would unconditionally agree to anything. Years of brutal bullying and unreasonable suppression erupted in that moment. Elena raised her hand and slapped her mother-in-law hard across the face. She was just out of the hospital, weak. After using all her strength, she herself nearly fell, but seeing her mother-in-law's rapidly swelling old face, she felt a surge of triumphant pleasure. The next second, excruciating pain shot through her. Marcus had swung a stool and smashed it against her. Elena fell to the ground, instinctively protecting her head and face as fists rained down on her like hail. Marcus beat her, yelling, "I'm getting that house no matter what. That's my parents' house. They're old. Where will they live?" Elena struggled. "Let them go to Julian. Your childhood sweetheart made it big. He's willing to pay tens of thousands in medical bills for you. Finding a place for your parents is nothing to him." At the mention of Julian, Marcus's expression turned sinister, his fists landing even harder. Hearing Julian's name at such a time, Elena felt the pain in her heart completely overshadow the physical pain. She had always thought her parents paid her medical bills. She never imagined it was Julian. But if he knew she was sick, why didn't he come and see her? She had embarked on the wrong path from the very beginning. Seeing her reduced to this state, why didn't he come and take her away? Marcus was still cursing. The dual agony of body and mind caused a long-suppressed regret and hatred in Elena's mind to suddenly explode. Dazed, she fumbled for a broken piece of a stool on the floor, struggled, and raised her hand. When she came to, Marcus was lying in a pool of blood. Her mother-in-law was screaming and had run away. Evidently, she was calm, almost docile, as she went with the police to the station. The verdict came quickly. She was sentenced to 6 years in court. The lawyer defending her was highly skilled, presenting years of evidence of Marcus's abuse, which helped reduce her sentence. She had always thought the renowned, high-powered lawyer was someone her parents had specially hired to save her. But not long after entering prison, she suddenly understood. Her parents were just an ordinary elderly couple nearing retirement. How could they have the connections to hire such a lawyer? The answer was obvious. During visitation, she begged her parents to somehow get Julian to see her. The wait was agonizingly long. Unexpectedly, On the next visiting day, he actually came. The Julian now had matured to look exactly as he had before his death in the previous life. Handsome, mature, but with a much more relaxed look in his eyes. She'd heard long ago that he was married, his wife his college classmate. It seemed he was very happy. Elena stared blankly into Julian's eyes. His gaze was as gentle as ever, as if possessing a magical quality that made her eyes well up. She whispered hoarsely, "I regret it." Unfortunately, her confession received no concern or sympathy from Julian. He just smiled calmly, comforting her. It's all in the past. For a moment, countless words choked in Elena's throat, unable to escape. They sat in silence, separated by the glass wall. Julian no longer had the patience to wait for her. Seeing her remain silent, he stood up to leave. Watching his retreating figure, Elena suddenly felt as if a large piece of her heart had been gouged out. "Julian! Julian!" she screamed like a madwoman, desperately pounding on the glass. The transparent barrier starkly separated them into two different worlds. Even when she killed Marcus, she had never felt such despair. Fortunately, Julian turned back in time and sat down opposite her again. "You were reborn too, right? You were reborn too, right?" Afraid he wouldn't wait any longer, Elena frantically blurted out the question that had been burning in her heart. She desperately wanted an answer, yet she was terrified of getting one. Julian was noncommittal. Seeing his calm demeanor, Elena became even more certain of her suspicion. "If so, why don't you love me anymore? Why didn't you save me?" Under her almost hysterical questioning, Julian finally spoke. "Everyone in this world has to be responsible for their own choices. In the last life, he chose Elena and ended up betrayed and murdered. In this life, Elena chose Marcus, so she had to bear the consequences." Julian's words struck Elena like a muffled thunderclap, sending continuous, immense shockwaves through her. She wanted to say she regretted it. She truly had regretted it for a long time. But when she came back to her senses, Julian was gone. Elena knew that in this life, and in all her lives to come, she would never see him again. After the visit ended, she was led back to her cell by the guards. It was midday, but the prison corridor was exceptionally dark, like her life, long, silent, and seemingly without end.